The enabling technology used by terrorists and foreign state spies is increasingly secure, encrypted communications.
Decryption has moved from being something available to something that is the default.
Would it help to just impose requirements on device manufacturers like Apple? Is that a potential solution?
It's certainly a potential solution. What we're going to ask is that the companies have an ability to access it, and then with lawful process, we be able to get the information.
The government wants industry to create backdoors, cryptographic flaws in its own products. The problem is that anybody, the Russian intelligence service, malicious hacking collectives, can then exploit those same flaws.
I believe that United States companies, including many founded and headquartered in my home state, have an obligation to do everything they can to ensure that their products and services are not allowed to be used to foment the evil that ISIL embodies.
A mandate for a backdoor makes a lot of sense as long as you also pass a law requiring ISIS to use American secure communication services. You're not going to solve the problem of being unable to read their communications by a mandate affecting American companies.
Doesn't providing a way around encryption expose consumers to potential theft of personal information?
There is risk.
Cryptography experts are clear on this point. Any vulnerability opens all of us up to attack.
The problem is it's hard to build a car that bank robbers can't use or a phone that criminals can't make calls on, and it's hard to build a secure technology that's only secure for good people.
If the government's policy were implemented, our bank accounts, our credit card accounts, our online transactions would all be vulnerable to attack.
The choice is to make a technology that leaves everyone secure or to make one that's weaker and more vulnerable for everyone.
Again, I'm not an expert. Public safety is my thing, but I think I take issue with the notion of weakening encryption. I also take issue with the whole backdoor notion. I don't know, but I think a lot of smart people should talk to each other to try and figure that out.
Folks who admit they're not technical experts say, well, you're smart, you'll think of something. Do more magic, tech wizards, and we're going to pass a law that says you have to. It's irresponsible. You might as well ask them to come up with a perpetual motion machine.
Encryption, which was always available over the last 20 years, has become the default. And that change has been accompanied by an explosion in apps that ride on the internet and offer end-to-end encrypted communication.
Look, this explosion of encrypted tools is a great thing for our cybersecurity, but you start telling 1,000 little garage startups that they've got to comply with some complicated regulatory mandate for law enforcement access, well, you're either going to get mistakes and vulnerabilities added, or they're going to decide it's not worth the hassle of providing encryption to protect their users' data.
If the data is strongly encrypted, we can collect it, but it'll be gobbledygook.
And yet ISIS use of encryption has not stopped the FBI from taking down terrorists here in America.
Can you quantify this at all? Can you tell us how often the FBI, acting pursuant to a warrant or other lawful process, encounters encrypted information you cannot access?
The answer is I really can't at this point.
This is almost the most ridiculous thing. The FBI has been crying wolf about going dark because of encryption for 25 years, and the apocalypse has not arrived. Obviously, it's going to be a problem in some investigations, but until we know how many, how serious it is, whether they can get the information they need to make their cases in other ways, it's insane to be talking about such a kind of drastic legislative solution when we know there are downsides to that.
We're not going to ask the companies for any keys to the data.
Except that the FBI does want the encryption keys. They went to LavaBit, an encrypted email provider used by Edward Snowden, and demanded that they turn over their encryption keys. But rather than compromise the privacy and security of their customers, LavaBit chose to shut down instead. The FBI's approach to the encryption issue is a threat to every business that utilizes encryption to protect its customers' communications.
We do agree that there's an international component to this, but America is the big dog, right? The innovation is here, the energy is here, the infrastructure is here. What we do will set the tone and the pattern for the rest of the world.
Well, we lead the world in innovation until you tell American companies they're not allowed to offer truly secure products anymore. But the dangerous thing is we might end up leading the rest of the world, because once the United States, the champion of freedom, decides that we're going to demand backdoor access to secure communications, you better believe Russia and Saudi Arabia and China are going to insist on exactly the same access to those compromised systems once that capability has been built.
The truth is, encryption is as American as apple pie. George Washington, John and Abigail Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison. They all used encryption to secure their private communications from King George and from others who had no business reading their private mail. Americans today have exactly the same right to use encryption to secure their communications from those who have no right to see it.
So maybe the least obvious but most important thing to understand about this is that this isn't just another privacy versus security debate, or even a security versus security debate, even though weakening encryption is definitely bad for cybersecurity. It's really about a radical proposal to centrally plan the evolution of technology. If you say companies have to provide some kind of law enforcement access to people's messages, then you automatically create pressure towards centralized instead of decentralized peer-to-peer architectures, pressure for closed, locked-down systems rather than open and modifiable ones that users can change. The real question here is whether the design and development of technology is going to be driven by what's technically best for users and serves their needs, or what's most convenient for law enforcement.